First and foremost, I want to congratulate you on your primary win.
Yes.
I voted for you.
Yes.
I'm a human rights activist as well as a spokesperson for the Human Rights Coalition. It's a group that's made up of prisoners, the family of prisoners, and ex-prisoners. Trying to remember what I might need my glasses, that might help. Okay. In the past, the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office has had a reputation for corruption and known for over a decade, and known for over-incarceration of Black and brown men. Of a major concern is the rise in incarceration of women and how this is impacting the family and the community. The arrest and incarceration of women who are heads of single families has increased by 700% between 1980 and 2017. While the majority of men are already in prison, the children are being placed in foster care and being fast-tracked into adoption within 1 year. Nearly 75% of those children who are in foster homes wind up in prison as well. This is really overwhelming for those whose children are subjected to, As you can see, this is a huge impact and breakdown of the family in this scenario. My question to you is, one, would you bring back credibility to the DA's office by continuing an overall reduction in the arrest and imprisonment? And as far as women offenders, do you feel keeping families together is a priority? And are you open to alternative programs such as the MacArthur Fund and possibly meeting with family members quarterly?
Wow. That's
Okay, thank you. And thank you for congratulating me on winning, but the fact is, I congratulate you on winning, because I only got one vote, and there were another 59,000. So I think that you should all congratulate yourselves and the people you know. So the question goes a few interesting places, but one of the places that it goes is the phenomenon of women being arrested when men are already locked up, the children being removed, fast-tracked for adoption, and then ending up, big surprise, in trouble under all these circumstances. We have this terrible mass incarceration problem. A lot of it begins with the war on drugs. It continues now. There have been some improvements, thank goodness. The MacArthur Foundation gave Philadelphia a booby prize by coming here with like $2 or $3 million to try to assist with reducing the prison population in the county. And that has been pretty successful so far. The prison population in general in the county is down about 18%. If you go up the State Road, one of the facilities is the Riverside Correctional Facility, and that is where women are kept in our county system. The only good thing I can say about that is that it did separate women inmates from male inmates many years ago, and in some ways that is a positive thing. But what you're talking about, which is, the statistics on this work out like this. So African American men, 1 out of 3 will experience jail. 1 out of 3. Among white men, it's 1 out of 17. Among black women, it's 1 out of 18. And among white women, it's 1 out of a much bigger number. 1 out of, several hundred, right? The impact, of course, is that when 1 out of 3 black men experience jail, the women, their sisters, the mothers of their children, their mothers, end up being the glue in that community as this goes on for decade after decade after decade. And then when you start to incarcerate women who are the glue, now you're left with children who are being pushed into government's institutions and so on. I believe we have to have decarceration of men. We have to have decarceration of women. And I also believe it should always be an issue, if a prosecutor is trying to be fair and even-handed, to consider the consequences of incarceration. We have to consider the victims. We have to consider what is going to keep society safe. We have to consider the defendant, and we have to consider the defendant's family. And any intelligent judge or intelligent prosecutor who ignores the reality that making a decision to put someone in jail is going to force children into foster care is not doing their job. There may be exceptional situations where that is necessary, but that is an absolute last resort. Unless you're dealing with a couple who are both committing murder, this should be an absolute last resort. Am I in favor of diversionary programs? Absolutely. There are a whole bunch of diversionary programs now, but they are not as broad as they should be. And I'll just give you an example. It's very common to draw this line between people charged with nonviolent offenses and those who are supposed to be the good people, and people charged with violent offenses and those who are supposed to be the bad people. So the diversionary programs, for example, have said, well, if we catch a young man who has no prior record and he's in possession of a gun, which he purchased legally, that's jail time. That's a conviction, that's a felony, that's jail time. That has been the attitude of this DA's office forever. And I'm not in favor of guns, so you can understand where they're starting with that. But let me give you an example of how crazy that is. So I represented a young man who's about 100 pounds, not a very tall guy, got beat up in a park. He'd done a couple years of college, something wasn't going perfectly in life. He gets beat up in a park, goes and he buys a gun at a gun shop. He can do that, he's got no prior record. He had ID, the law allows it. He purchases that gun, he brings it home. He doesn't know that in Philadelphia, unlike Montgomery County, unlike Bucks County, you have to have a special permit to carry that weapon on the street. Same is true in Pittsburgh, but only Philly and Pittsburgh, nowhere else, right? So the kid starts carrying a gun around because he's afraid of getting beat up again. Car gets stopped, he says, "Excuse me, officer, I have a gun. It's right here." Police get the gun. "Oh, where's the bullets?" "I have them in the clip, right here." Gives him the bullets, right? DA prosecutes him. I said, "Hello, DA, this young man wants to go into the military," which is what he told me. "If you would just give him a diversionary program for this, then he will qualify to go into the military, which could be his career. He wants to do career military." "Nope, can't do it." "Excuse me, DA, do you understand that if you give him a felony conviction, the military will never take him? You are going to make sure he can never be in the military if you really need to convict him for this." "Nope, we want to convict him, but we'll give him probation." It's like, wait a minute, hold on. So, like, he's such a danger, you really got to put a conviction on this kid. You got to make sure he can't go to the military, or you can put no conviction and get him out of Philly in the military and give him a chance at a future. But you really got to convict him. Yeah, you got to convict him. It's politics. That is just straight up politics. It's what it's always been. So, yes, we need more diversion. I am not a guy who owns a gun. I'm not in favor of guns, even though I know how to shoot them, even though I have my hunter safety certificate. I'm not a fan of guns, but some things are just stupid. When you crush a young man's future for no good reason, for doing something that he could have done legally in Bucks County, legally in Montgomery County, when it's obvious he's not a gangster, he's not out to hurt people, he's civil and polite to police, he only took it because he'd been beat up. When you can't find a way to have a diversionary program for someone like that, then you're doing politics. So we need to have broader diversionary programs for men, for women. We need to look at the whole picture of what is caused by conviction, the whole picture of what is caused by incarceration, and we need to be honest about how many people are affected by it and use it surgically instead of using it like a blunt instrument, which is what we do now.
All right. Thank you. Thank you,
What happened to the kid in the story?
Kid in the story insisted on a trial because he did not want to plead guilty, and nobody wanted him to plead guilty. He went to trial, and a judge found him guilty. And he ended up with he had in fact possessed it, and the police were not lying when they said he had it. So the judge, I think, frankly didn't want to, but the judge found him guilty. He ended up convicted of that felony, and he was given a probationary sentence. But he will never go into the military, and it's going to be much more difficult for him to be employed. It's potentially going to mean that his income is limited, and it may very well create a cycle of poverty in, one more young man who didn't deserve it.
Okay. Thank you.